Three of you in good pens. Christie.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
New Jersey is receiving praise for most of what happened on the roads for helping drivers, etc. when you compare it to New York City. However, you're receiving criticism, and I know you say you were in touch with the senator for not being in the state during the blizzard. Do you have a response to that?
Sure. Let me explain it to everybody. I don't think there's been another time in the year that I've been governor where both the lieutenant governor and I were out of state at the same time. We coordinate our schedules on a regular basis. But here's what happened. This summer, the lieutenant governor came to me and told me her father, who is gravely ill, had planned a vacation. What we hope won't be, but fear may be, a last vacation for him to take all of his children and all of his grandchildren on a cruise for 2 weeks. This was one of his final wishes, and she came to me and said, I know it's a long time, but is it okay for me to do this? And there's no way that I would look at my lieutenant governor and say to her, no, you can only have a week, come back. At the same time, I made a promise to my children that at the end of my first year as governor, that I was going to take them to Disney World the week between Christmas and New Year's. My first and most important responsibility, in my view, is as a husband and a father. And I think I made that pretty clear to the people in New Jersey when I was running, that I saw that as my most important job. And I was not going to rescind my child's Christmas gift, especially when I was convinced that we had a plan in place, that this is not like in the 1800s when no one will be able to get me. Believe me, my cell phone was ringing where I was much more than I would have preferred it to under normal circumstances when I'm away on a family vacation. But I was not going to look at my children and say, no, we're not going. We had a plan in place. As you can see, standing behind me and in the back of the room, we have able leadership in the executive branch of this government to be able to deal with this problem, and they dealt with it. I was, as I said earlier, talking to them on a regular basis to be able to know what was going on and to provide whatever input and recommendations that I needed to make. Lastly, I had complete faith and confidence in Senator Sweeney. We talked about this when I told him this is what the situation was. I explained to him why both of us were going to be out of the state at the same time. It was not something, candidly, that the lieutenant governor really wanted to talk about publicly. It's an intensely personal thing to have a parent that ill and to have this type of trip. And so we didn't talk about this initially because we didn't think it was really anybody's business other than the people at the senior levels of government who needed to know, and Kim and her family. But as the partisanship rose, as the fact that it's like kind of a slow news week and everybody loves to report on the weather, rose, and you need something to talk about, and I get that, I understand it. We ultimately made the decision to give a fuller explanation for why. But the idea that, all this carping and craziness about how could I leave the state stranded, I was on the phone not only, with my staff, but with members of the press, who had questions to let them know about what was going on. So this is just partisanship and kind of the nature of the time of the year, Christine. All you guys would be doing this time of the year, absent some disaster, would be retrospectives on what happened in 2010. So you got a disaster to fill the week. And so people want to talk about that, and the pure partisans in the state will say and do anything. I hope that those people, like Dick Cody and Ray Lesniak and Barbara Buono, who took shots at the lieutenant governor without knowing the full story, I wish they would just finally learn that this is a responsible government. They may not agree with our policies, but we're not irresponsible. And we didn't willy-nilly plan vacation to be away at the same time. There were two compelling family circumstances, a promise I had made before she knew that her father had planned this trip, and I think a pretty obvious and understandable desire for a daughter to want to be on a trip like this with her father and his grandchildren. So, all the rest of the stuff is just kind of partisan stuff that I have to tell you, it just rolls off my back. It's what I expect. And if you're going to let that kind of stuff bother you in this job, then you're not going to last very long in it. And I intend to last in it for quite some time. You have a follow-up.
I do have a follow-up. Have you talked to the Lieutenant Governor? I mean, we all read it in the newspapers. How is she taking it? Is she?
I haven't spoken to her directly. Her chief of staff, John Hutchinson, who's here, has been communicating with her, and we got her permission to discuss the personal nature of her trip from her while she was away on the trip. My initial agreement with her was that we just wouldn't talk about it. It's not the kind of thing you want talked about, spread out all over the place. So it's, I feel badly for her that the trip had to be publicized in the way that it was. I really think that's something that should have just been kept private, but circumstances and the reaction of some real partisans in New Jersey who care only about scoring political points and don't care, about understanding what the real human story is, made it necessary for us to talk about it, and I wish that we hadn't had to. I would be more than happy to take the heat myself for it. But when they started attacking her, I think people didn't understand that this is a very responsible person who takes the responsibilities of the job, very seriously. And have folks be saying, well, why do we have a lieutenant governor? No one put a lieutenant governor in place through the Constitution to worry about when a governor goes on vacation. They did it because we had 2 consecutive governorships where the governors who were elected did not fulfill a significant portion of their term. And that we had a Senate president, one of one party, one of the other, who then had extraordinary power over the levers of government in the state, and members of the legislature and members of the public became uncomfortable with any one person having that much power and authority. That's why the lieutenant governor's position was put in. Kim Guadagno is an outstanding public servant. She takes her job seriously. We talked about this beforehand, and it was coordinated and planned in a way to make sure that all contingencies were covered. Right?